Aliprando. I'm a gameplay designer at ZeniMax, and I do creature combat for the Elder Scrolls Online.
Okay. You're doing only the combat animations of how it
No,
works?
I do all the AI and combat for, like, anytime a monster attacks you, or they work together, or they'll spread around you. So I do all the scripting for them. I have a team that does all the animation and sound and effects in it as well, and I'm just the gameplay member that does all the AI for them.
What Nick showed us today and last fall was quite impressive for an MMO. So was this one of your dedicated goals that you have wanted you to step up onto a new level in Monster AI?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really important to not only present something new to the players that they wouldn't experience normally, but as an Elder Scrolls game, it's really important for the monsters to be part of a living, breathing world. And just having a monster stand in front of you and be a bag of experience and gold is really not exciting and not what the fans are expecting for an Elder Scrolls game. So giving it a little bit more believability in how the monsters act and react to you was really important for us.
Mm-hmm. So on the first levels, we did only see basic monsters. Mm-hmm. And of course, we've seen some more complex fights during the presentation, but when it comes to raid, is there still room?
There absolutely is still room to grow, and actually the dungeon team does an amazing job of taking the monsters that you normally see in the everyday environment and adapting them to new situations. So a great example that you saw today was the Spider Daedra. Mm-hmm. So Elder Scrolls fans from Oblivion would expect her to summon a spiderling and work together with her spiderling to defeat you. So her spiderling in Overworld normally puts down a web in the area, and the Spider Daedra summons an entire lightning storm on the web. So the goal is to not get trapped in the web and not be a victim of their synergy. In the dungeon team took the themes of her webs and her lightning and adapted it to that convenient play of that really special monster. So in that example, she actually pulled you in with a web and then created a lightning storm in her area, and it was your job to try and get out before that happened. So they do an amazing job of taking monsters that you understand their play and you understand their synergy and adapting them in a way that's new and exciting in the actual dungeon itself.
So I guess when players should understand how the technique works, it's very tough to build this on their own. I think you have to work closely with the dungeon teams and of course with the animators. Yes,
absolutely. The dungeon teams are really passionate about making sure that the monsters feel like they're an adaptation of the normal monster, but we actually work together and we actually kind of steal ideas back and forth from each other. So they might see something that's happening on a monster overworld and go, I'm going to take that and just do a more grand version of that. Or I might see something in the dungeon team that's doing, and I say, you know what, I think if I adapted that in a certain way, a single player could really cope with that and make it a really difficult and intriguing fight that they wouldn't normally do. A great example is we have Frost Astronauts, of course, that are really familiar from previous Elder Scrolls games. And the dungeon team took the Frost Astronaut and made it summon pillars of ice that kind of like trap you in certain areas, but then the ice could crumble and crack and do damage in the area if the Frost Astronaut walked through it. I saw them do that, and I was like, ooh, I could do a version of that in the overworld. So when you fight a Frost Astronaut normally, it puts these pools of ice that could crack and crumble around you, but when you go into a dungeon, it's like a version of that you would need to work together with other players in order to defeat. So we work really hard to make sure the monster feels natural, not only in Overworld, but in the dungeon, and also giving you a really important fight that's threatening at the same time.
So the main source of your inspiration is are the 5 Elder Scrolls games so far? Absolutely,
yeah.
But isn't it pretty tough to make so many different monsters, and not only monsters, you do have human enemies, so a lot of them have to be unique in a way, so not repetitive.
Right. One of the ways that we do that is if you fight a Storm Mage, the Storm Mage does something where they teleport in front of you, become a conduit of lightning, and strike the whole area of lightning. The best opportunity is to roll dodge away from it. But any lightning mage that you find will do that. But their behavior may change in a group where they're actually part of a necromancy cult, and so they actually might sacrifice themselves to summon an undead creature, or they're part of a bandit group and they might do something else, or you're part of the Daggerfall Covenant as a player and that Storm Mage is actually an Aldmeri Dominion NPC, and they'll do something different if they're an Aldmeri player, or an Aldmeri NPC. So you'll find a Storm Mage and say, I know what Storm Mages do, but I don't know what a Storm Mage of a Necromancy cult might do, or I don't know what a Storm Mage of an Aldmeri Dominion might do. So we present you with a mechanic that you know how to defeat, but we change the flavor of it depending on what the faction of that monster is.
Mm-hmm. Nice. What is the most complex complicated situation you have in the game so far?
Ooh, that's a tricky question. We have a couple that are pretty complex. I would say the most single complex, or like a single monster by itself, is the Daedric Titan. The Titan will actually change its behaviors depending on how you're fighting it. So if you're staying at range, it'll do certain things like that. If you come into melee, it might flap its wings and create a huge gust of rock that'll shake the earth and and kind of stagger you around. But if you're fighting, say, a Daedric cult, they will actually summon mini versions of Dark Portals. So you saw the Dark Portal examples for the Fighters Guild, and they'll summon actually smaller versions of that, which Daedra spill out of it, and you have to destroy the Daedric anchors in order to prevent that summoning from happening. We also have monsters called Lamia, and you might be familiar with Lamia from previous games, which were normally water creatures, and we have a land-based Lamia, and they actually sing and harmonize with each other. So it's really important for the player to actually listen to the Lamia and see what song they're singing, and if the Lamia actually start singing the same song together and harmonizing, it's really important for you to recognize that and stop it. So we have a lot of different complex things, some from just single individual monsters, some from factions, and some from really specific examples like the Lamia.
Mm-hmm. Was there a situation you have the friends and family better by now going, where the feedback from players came and said, okay, this is over the top again? How do you do it?
So not yet, but I'm waiting for it. I'm sure with beta coming around here and there absolutely will be feedback from the community, and the community is one of the most important aspects of any Elder Scrolls game. I mean, just the community alone is the reason why we're making the game. So it's very important for us to present a challenge to you that's fun and exciting, but something that you can overcome and not something that's overwhelming. So there has been iterations, and normally we stop that within the company playtest. Usually we'll go through a company playtest and I'll get feedback there. If it's really strong and immediate, of course we can change it whenever, but we haven't had any feedback yet where they either didn't like something. Somebody was a little surprised when a mud crab burrowed under the ground, and they were like, why are mud crabs so smart? Why do they burrow under the ground and then appear behind you? So that was the biggest negative piece of feedback that we've had about a single behavior so far, but listening to the community will be very important for making sure that these monsters are fun.
Yeah, we're going to make the switch to...
Okay.
Hello. So the synergy thing that you showed, I mean, it's really clever and really, just a clever idea. I wondered if you had any thoughts on why games hadn't necessarily tried that kind of AI interaction.
I think there has been attempts at it, but the monster synergies actually stem from is a couple, perhaps over a year ago, we did a in-house kind of like game jam where we were like, what are we going to put in our game? What's going to be interesting? And I made a synergy system specifically for the players.
Right.
I wasn't even thinking about monsters at the time. So that's when we started putting in player synergies. And then of course we want the combat from fighting monsters to be familiar when you go from PvE to PvP. We don't flip the game over on you and change all the numbers. So we said, well, what makes our monsters smart? What if monsters work together? What if monsters were doing synergies just like players were doing synergies? And so it really evolved from taking what the player does and trying to make the monster feel like they're doing what the player does.
And is that like a harder thing for your servers to kind of cope with? Does that kind of create overheads and kind of problems, and you've got a poor man who's trying to optimize all this stuff to...
Yes, that's me.
Sorry, you're a lady. Sorry.
Oh yes, it is overwhelming, you're right. Yes, the the really hardest part is knowing when something is over the top, when something is something that the player can't recognize. If the monsters are just doing crazy things that the player goes, I don't know what's going on. Like I don't even know what the challenge is in order to defeat it. That's something we really have to rein in.
Because there's quite a lot of kind of shouts and barks of them kind of saying, heal me, or set us on fire, and that kind of thing. So
another thing that was not very evident in those examples, but that was an instanced example. So in instances, we have more freedom to do those sorts of things. But for example, the tell system, when you can tell that a monster is charging up an attack or casting a spell or something like that, you only see those if the monster is targeting you.
Right.
So we present information to you that's relevant and important, and we let you just experience the world if it's not.
Okay.
So we present challenges to you and say, here's the challenge.
So it's almost like instanced behavior that it's...
It's more of like visibility checks. So I see a guy charging an attack on you, and I can come over and help you, but we make sure that that is only happening in your immediate vicinity and against you. So if somebody is 20 yards over that way fighting something that, or 20, 40 meters over that way, that's not really relevant to you right now. We don't need to show you that information, but you can still enjoy watching the combat.
So, so you talked a lot about monsters and creatures and things that we've seen in previous Elder Scrolls games. And that's lovely, it's really nice fan service, but I want to see something new, and I want to see something kind of different, and I wondered kind of what flexibility and kind of leeway you've got to just go, oh, sod it, I want to do it.
We have a lot of room, but we also have a great partnership with Bethesda. So we actually do have a lot of monsters that are new to lore and new Daedra, which absolutely we want to make sure that not only do they fit in the world, but they fit in an Elder Scrolls game. So when we come up with those things, we'll say, you know what, here's a picture of the monster. You know, do you think this fits in the lore? And we'll talk back and forth, and we'll be like, yes, this is definitely a great opportunity to put a new monster in the game. But then once we've all agreed that that's a great Elder Scrolls monster, we have free reign to make that monster do whatever we want it to do within the world, and make sure it feels like a part of that world.
One of my kind of criticisms of Elder Scrolls in general is that it can be quite po-faced. Like it's a bit. I know it's a gritty place and a dark place, but if you're going to play something for 300, 450 odd hours, you're talking about, like, there's got to be a kind of light and dark, and we didn't really see much of that today. So I just wondered if there's any examples or.
Yes. So actually. And I feel like when you feel like that, it has a lot to do with the vistas that you're seeing and the colors that you're seeing. And when you're in Skyrim, it's a lot of white, a lot of gray. And when you're in Morrowind, it's a lot of red, it's a lot of brown. There's a volcano, and we certainly take what you expect to see in Morrowind and Skyrim and put that in our game. But we also have areas like Black Marsh. We also have areas like Aradon, which is part of the Somerset Isles. And for example. Aldmer are well known for having everything in order, beautiful and perfect. So in Aradon, everything is actually pristine, beautiful, colorful. The hedges are well kept in perfectly neat rows and shapes. And so, yeah, going from different area to area, absolutely the area reflects the culture that lives in. When you're in Daggerfall looks completely different, and the color palette is completely different than Windhelm. And Windhelm is completely different than Eldenroot, which is a giant tree city in a wild forest in the Valen Woods. So, yeah, we don't want to fatigue you visually, and we certainly have environments that are very different and contrasting of each other. But we have to make sure that it's an Elder Scrolls game, and that when you go to Morrowind, it looks like Morrowind.
Something that I don't know if you can talk about this or not, but. If you've got this lovely scripting language and you've got this kind of lovely ability to make monsters do fun things, it gives you the ability to do quite interesting external bosses that are like your world boss and that kind of thing.
Right.
I guess the question is A, have you, and B, if you have, can you tell us about them?
We won't be talking about any world bosses or world events
Okay.
of that sort.
Okay, fine, all right. That's it. I'm done. I'm out.
Anything else?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.